We have to have systems in place that will have our very best want and desire to stay in the Army. If you look back at the numbers when I became G1 and when I came in 2003, recognized a problem that had existed for well over a decade, and that was captains leaving, or most talented captains leaving around the 5.5-year mark. About 55% stayed past 5.5-year mark. And the question was, how do you get at that? Well, there were no systems in the Army that we had in place to get at it. Occasionally, we might offer some assignments there. We might try to throw some money at it, but that was not cost effective. That we threw money at it here recently in the last few years, only to find out that 77% of them that took the money to stay in were going to stay with us anyway. They told us that after the fact, naturally. So we need to look at this more systemically. If you ask officers why they stay in the Army past their active duty service obligation, typically you'll get a couple of reasons for them. But one of them is that job satisfaction. They want to grow up and be like some senior officer they've seen or been around, or they've had some sort of an assignment which has been of intrinsic value to them that has caused them to stay in the Army. The Army has a pretty predictable career pattern, if you will. Now, it waxes and wanes over time, but an officer can anticipate that. And he weighs it against opportunity costs that are out there in the civilian world. And we have to find a way, I think, to satisfy some of his desires or her desires if we want to keep that talent here. And one of the ways that we do it, and we've addressed the problem for retention by going to the officers over the last few years and say, what would keep you in the Army? And invariably in the top three is an opportunity to go back to graduate school. And so we have initiated a program that began several years ago to offer that option to pre-commissioning cadets at West Point and 3- and 4-year scholarship ROTC cadets. And so we get people that might not stay with us if that program did not exist, that will now take them past their active duty service obligation up to about the 8-year mark. And the percentage that will now stay on in our Army far exceeds the percentage that we've had over the last 2 decades. When you get to the 10-year mark, well over 80% of all officers stay for a career. So it's the cost benefit is huge for us. Unlike the program I mentioned earlier where we spent about $500 million throwing money at people who were going to stay with us anyway, we put and invested in these young officers and are beginning to do that now. And if you believe the numbers crunchers, and I do, we're going to have somewhere on the order of 69 to 70% of any year group from those scholarship youngsters that will be with us at the 8-year mark. So that bodes well for the Army and retention here in the long term. My personal experience was that after 5.5 years, I got an opportunity to go back to graduate school at Florida State and an opportunity to coach football at that collegiate level. And I'd always thought that if I ever left the Army, it would be to be a football coach. I was disabused of that within that year or two, and so pleased that that happened. I came here to Army, up to West Point, still helped coach the football team and did some other sorts of things as well. But I got that out of my system, and I met people here at West Point during that assignment that I went on to serve with in multiple assignments throughout my career, and we developed a network that we extended to others as well. And I got a lot of satisfaction from that and continue to get it to this day. We have to deal with the market forces of today, the labor market that's out there right now. We deal with that, but our business model is different from other parts of the American economy. We are not interchangeable parts back and forth between corporate America. And inside the Army, internally, we're also not interchangeable parts. And that's one of the things that our Army, I hope, is beginning to recognize right now, that one size does not fit all. That we have to manage the talent that we bring in, we have to develop it over time, we have to employ it properly, and we have to match as best we can the talent that the individual officer has with Army requirements.